Yirmiyahu was a prophet, was a good chaver of mine. Never understood a single word he said, but we helped him to drink his yain. And we always have some mighty fine yain. Singing simchat le'olam, kol ha'yeladim now. Simchat to the dogim in the deep blue sea. Simchat to you and me. Yeah.
Welcome to the Haftarah Plethora video podcast, where we might not bring joy to the world, but we do talk about prophets like Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Ezekiel. And sometimes we just like a good story. And if we got a good one today, it's the second chapter of the book of Joshua, the first book of the Nevi'im section of the Tanakh. And if you like your trope fireworks, if you go for emotional, excited, expressive, fancy, powerful, thrilling, poignant.
Hold on there, Roger. I think you got a bad case of thesaurus filio there. You're getting carried away.
All right. But let's just say that this week, you get to show off your mastery because the trope are jiving in this Haftarah. And speaking of braggadocio, I'm Larry Herman, sipping some very fine wine and speaking Haftarah to my good chaver, Rick Muller, a.k.a. the King of Cannellation. And speaking of jiving, here are this week's pics of my granddaughter, Millie Rose, a.k.a. Amalia Vered, who had a great Memorial Day picnic with her family, including her Zadie and her Uncle Reuven.
Looks like you guys had a good time and some good eats. And hey, it also looks like Millie's got some cool shades there.
Indeed she does, although I don't think that she's into disguising herself into sunglasses yet. But I wonder if the heroes of our Haftarah this week didn't try to use disguises of their own in the background to this week's story.
You mean the spies? Not too hard to figure out the connection between this week's Parsha and the Haftarah. They're both biblical spy thrillers.
Funny you should say that, Rick, because that's exactly one of my thoughts and questions about the Haftarah. It seems to me that what could have been a real page-turner of a story was told in a rather peculiar manner, with an unexpected featured hero.
I think you're talking about our heroine, Rachav.
Exactly. Let's briefly review the plot as told in the 24 verses of our Haftarah. The chapter starts with Joshua sending out two unnamed spies to reconnoiter the land, Haaretz and Jericho. And already in the second half of the verse, they come to Rachav's brothel and they lodge there.
Well, I guess if you want the lay of the land, that's the place to go.
Oh my, Rick, that's more my style of joke than yours. But it doesn't sound like they've done any reconnoitering, at least not in this telling. Already in the second verse, the king of Jericho finds out about the spies, and by the third line, he sent his messengers to tell Rachav to turn them over.
Word ricochets fast in a walled city.
Indeed. But it's remarkable that by verse 4, we learn that Rachav has hidden the spies and she's about to lie to the king's men about them. We have no idea what would motivate her to betray her king and her own people and side with the Israelites.
Maybe it was their powers of persuasion.
Whatever it was, she convinces the Jericho men that the spies have already snuck out of the gates and they pursue them.
Like I said, powers of persuasion.
Both Rachav and the spies? Interesting idea. But somehow, I'm thinking her clientele has told some late night stories over cigars and cognac at Rachav's bordello, which has persuaded her to throw in with the invaders.
Well, you love to embellish an already good story.
All in the spirit of Midrash, my friend. Now comes the main part of the Haftarah. 13 verses, more than half of the entire Haftarah, consisting of a conversation between Rachav and the spies. She reveals to them that the people of Jericho, and presumably the rest of the land, have already heard of the great exploits and power of the Israelites over their enemies. She even borrows a line directly from the Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea. In verse 9 of the Haftarah, Rachav says, V'chi nafla ematchem aleinu, v'chi namogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipnechem, because dread of you has fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land are quaking before you, which is actually an inversion from the Song of the Sea at the end of verse 15 and beginning of verse 16, which we actually recite every single day. Now, mogu kol yoshvei Canaan, tipol alehem amata v'fachad.
I guess Rachav knew her Hebrew Bible.
Well, or who knows? Perhaps she was the composer of the song. Regardless, she negotiates for the safety of her family. The spies follow her instructions to the letter and return to Joshua. And in the final verse of the Haftarah, verse 24, the two spies sent by Joshua invert the message of the spies in our Parsha. Instead of telling Joshua that the inhabitants are too strong for them to conquer, as the 10 of the spies told Moshe, they say, Ki natan Adonai b'yadenu et kol haaretz, that Adonai has given the entire land into our power. And finally, quoting Rachav and quoting the Song of the Sea, they conclude, V'gam namogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipanenu, and also all the inhabitants of the land are quaking before you.
And I'm quaking at the liberties you're taking with our text. But you're absolutely correct about the dramatic effects of the trope. There is a bunch of great trope, and lots of great combinations.
Rick, I'm in heaven with 8 Kadmava Azla combos, and Azla Gerish, and 2 Gershaims. Who could ask for anything more?
Well, I could. And there are more. There's 3 Pazers, 2 of them in combo with the Tili Shakatana, plus a Kadmavia Azla.
Those are the best combos around for my money. Kind of like watching ice skaters doing a triple toe loop into a salchow and finishing with a lutz.
How'd we get to figure skating? Never mind. I'll tell you more about the trope as we're reading. How do you want to break it up today?
Well, Rick, I thought that we'd break it into 4 parts. We'll start with verses 1 through 7. That's the background story. Joshua sends the spies. They meet Rachav. The king sends his men. Rachav lies to them, and the king's men pursue the spies outside the gates. Then we'll read verses 8 through 13, the first half of the conversation between Rachav and the spies, where Rachav speaks to the spies, revealing the critical information and demanding protection. And then in verses 14 through 21, the spies pledge protection, but with conditions, and Rachav agrees. And we conclude with verses 22 through 24, the last 3 verses. The spies make their escape and make their report to Joshua.
Perfect. Let's start with the first verse, which begins explosively. The text is found on page 857. And thanks to our technical wizard, you can follow it on the screen in front of you.
Rick, you have any thoughts about the first 7 verses before you chant them?
Okay, well, what jumps out to me is the Tilisha Gedolah on Yehoshua bin Nun, which echoes in the rest of that sentence. Vayavohu has one, and Hine Anashim in verse 2 has it. So the order of Joshua to the spies is carried out by these 2 men. And then Vayelchu has a Kadmavia Azla all on one word, which is kind of rare, but it shows the intensity of the trip, how they made it into the city. It's not really explained, but it was a dangerous kind of mission, I suppose.
I have an idea about that one, Rick.
To sneak into a city, yes.
I think the Vayelchu and the Vayavohu being together and both with dramatic trope indicates that they set out and they came directly to, where did they come? To Beit Isha Zona, to the basically brothel. They didn't go anywhere else. They didn't scout out the land. They didn't really scout out Jericho. They headed to the brothel. And you know why they headed to the brothel right away?
They were thirsty.
No, you said before, where else to get good information?
Yeah, right. That's the center of town. That's where the merchants come and go. So,
okay, go ahead.
Okay, and then the king gets the same, in verse 3, the king gets the same Tilisha Gedolah, produce the men, and she basically refuses. She lies to him that she didn't even know where they were. And verse 4, Vatikach Haisha, the drama of taking the men and hiding them individually. You can see the commentary on the bottom there of the Eitz Chaim. But she takes action. She's not timid about it. It's not like they're telling her we're going to hide over here. She takes charge, which is a great thing. And then she refuses to produce them.
All right. Sounds like a lot of dramatic trope. So why don't we start with the bracha and then hear the first 7 verses of the Haftarah.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. And don't forget, you've got the text on the screen. Thanks to Norm.
Vayishlach Yoshua bin Nun min hashitim shnayim anashim meraglim cheresh lemor lechu Re'u et haaretz v'et Yericho vayelechu vayavo'u beit isha zona ushma Rachav vayishkevu shama vaye'amar lemelech Yericho lemor hine Anashim bauhena halayla mibnei Yisrael lachpor et haaretz vayishlach melech Yericho el Rachav lemor otzi anashim habaim elayich Asher ba'u levetech ki lachpor kol haaretz ba'u vatikach haisha et shnei hanashim vatitzpeno vatomer ken ba'u elai hanashim Velo yadati me'ayin heima. Before I go on, Vatomer has the munach lagarme. Vatomer, there's a hesitation there before she says yes, which really isn't the answer to the question from the king, but there's drama there. Verse 5, Vayehi hashar liskor bachoshech Anashim yatza'u loho yadati. She pretends not to know. Anahalchu anashim ridfu maher acharehem kitasigum vehi he'elatam hagaga batit menem befishtei ha'etz Aruchot lach al hagag vehanashim radfu achrehem derech hayarden al hamaberot vehashar sagaru acharei kasher yatsu harodfim acharehem.
Great. So now we have the encounter between Rachav and the spies. What have you got to say about that first part of the encounter, Rick?
Well, you've got Yadati has the Zakef Gadol. So what does she really know? She says, I know. But here it's the truth that she knows that the power of God and all that. Ki natan Adonai, the Dargat Tavir there. That's going to be echoed later. And then Vechina Mogu. So this is the second of the Namogus. Shirat Hayam is the first. This is the second one with a Tavir underneath. And
The
that's
first,
gonna,
the first one in
in the Haftarah,
the
yes.
Haftarah. So the important information here in verse 9 is the spies have discovered that she knows and that the people know all about the power of God and the power of the Israelites.
Uh-huh. And then in verse 10, the pazer, the first pazer, talks about what you did, asitem, and to the two kings, and the malchei ha'amori as the kadma v'azla, the two kings, each one gets a curve on top, if you want to think of it that way. But she's relating what the Israelites did to the kings to what's going to happen to Jericho.
I like that. And in fact, in verse 11, it sucks all the air, all the wind out of them because that ruach
Yes.
has a
Also,
tavir.
yes, also with a tavir. The namogu links to the ruach, od ruach. And then there's a yativ on the key because God has all the power. And va'asitem again in verse 12. So what you did there with the kings, please in the future you do also to my family. You have the power to save my family. So that's what she's interested in there.
Right. It's a vav ha'apuch, which means it takes the asitem from being past tense to being future. But I'm gonna drush a little bit and saying, and it's a vav ha'apuch in terms of reverse what you're doing. Instead of destroying the kings, you're going to save my family.
Yes, exactly. And that goes up to 13.
All right.
Okay.
You want to chant?
Yes, so 8 to 13. Vehema teram yishkavun vehi alta alehem al hagag vatomer el ha'anashim yadati kinatan Adonai lachem et haaretz V'chi nafla emachem aleinu, v'chi namogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipnechem, ki shamanu et asher hovish Adonai et mei yam suf mipnechem, b'tzeichem mimitzrayim, Asher asitem lishnei malchei ha'amori asher be'ever hayarden l'sichon ul'og asher hecheramtem otam v'nishma v'imas levavenu v'lo kama od ruach Beish mipnechem ki Adonai Elohechem hu Elohim b'shamayim mima'al ve'al haaretz mitachat ve'ata ishavuna li b'Adonai ki asiti machem chased Vasitem gamatem im beit avi chesed untatem li ot emet v'hachayitem et avi v'et imi v'et achai v'et achyotai v'et kol asher lahem V'yitzaltem et nafshotenu mimavet.
Rick, you know, their sisters are in that verse we were talking about.
Yeah, but not later, huh? And there's just a minor typo there. Achotai, sisters. You're supposed to read it with a yud there, achyotai, but the print was in the Eitz Chaim. It's the aleph, the chet, the vav, and then the taf. Achotai. Sisters. I think it has something to do with the brothel and the sisters in the brothel. I don't know what to do with it, but they're mentioned, and later on they're not. But anyway,
Well, we could go in that direction, but I suggest we move forward to the next
Yeah.
set of verses. In fact, we go to verses 14 through 21, which is where
Yes.
the spies basically tell Rachav what the conditions are for actually protecting her. And what are your
Yes.
thoughts on the trope there?
All right, so Vayomer, what are they going to say? That's the Dargah all by itself in verse 14. It starts off really dramatic, intense on that word. And then it leads to the Pazer and Tikvat in verse 18. Yeah, there's Venach Beitem Shama, you should hide there. That's got some emphasis. But Tikvat Chut Hashani Hazeh, the crimson cord, that's the saving vehicle. It's like the staff of Moses. It's the thing. It's the
Well, it's a
Maltese
symbol.
falcon. It's the symbol of the story. Yeah.
Or it's the blood on the doorpost for the Pesach offering. But I
Right.
have a different idea about this as well.
Yes.
The et tikvat chut hashani hazeh. And we talked about this, that a tikvat is a cord, but a tikva is also hope. And so this chut, this line, this crimson line, is giving her the hope that she and her family will be saved.
Right, because the people up, I guess that it's out the window, out the main wall, so the Israelites can see. Hey, there's one window there with the cord hanging out. So save everybody in that place. And she's warned in verse 19, the third pazer of the story, the big warning that you better not go outside. Veitech, your houses has a dargah, your house, and then there's a munach lagarme there, separating the inside from the outside, the chutzah. So that's the dividing line.
But Rick, not to get too technical,
Yeah.
there's no munach. You've got a dargah.
Yes.
What do you call it? A pasak?
A pasek, divider, a separator. Yeah.
Pasek, and then you've got a tavir. And I don't know that I've ever actually seen that where the dargah and the tavir are actually separated.
Yeah, that's really, really rare.
What do you have to do? Do you pause there?
That's the red line. That's the crimson cord.
I like it. Okay.
But yeah, you pause there a little bit. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And then this section again closes verse 21, the Tikvat Hashani there. Pretty common trope, but there it is again.
There you go. It's either a cord or it's a hope or it's both. So why don't you read verses
14 to 21.
14 to 21. Thank you.
Vayomru lahanashim nafshenu tachtechem lamut im lo tagidu. If you don't tell, if you don't say, im has the yativ, et divarenu zeh v'haya v'teit Adonai lanu et haaretz ve'asinu imach chesed ve'emet v'toridem b'chevel ve'ad hachalon ki ve'tach bekir hachoma uvachoma hi yoshavet v'tomer lahem hahara lechu ben yifga'u v'chem harotfim v'nach beitem shama shloshet yamim ad shov harotfim ve'achar telchu ledarkechem vayomru elecha anashim nekiyim anachnu mishuatecha zeh asher hishbatanu hine anachnu va'im ba'aretz et tikvat chut hashani hazeh tiksheri b'chalon asher horatenu vo ואת אביך ואת אמך, ואת אחייך, ואת כל בית אביך, תאספי אלייך הביתה. והיה כל אשר יצא מדלתי ביתך החוצה דמו וראשו, ואנחנו נקיים, וכל אשר יהיה איתך בבית דמו וראשנו, אם יד תהיה בו, ואם תגידי את דברנו זה, והיינו נקיים משבועתך אשר השבעתנו, ותאמר כדבריכם כן הוא, ותשלחם וילכו, ותקשור את תקוות השני בחלון.
Rick, I have just two comments.
Yes.
One is I just really love that pazer with the Tlisha Katana and then the Karma Vazla, and it really does sound like a figure skating combination to me.
Yes.
And the second one is the Chesed Ve'emet, which concludes verse 14. And you know, Chesed Ve'emet appears 16 times in the Tanakh. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
And the first time it appears, Joseph is speaking to, Jacob is about to die. And he's speaking to his son Joseph. And then the second time, if I'm not mistaken, is in Shemot, in Exodus, where we have the 13 attributes of God. And I think that Chesed Ve'emet is one of them.
Notzer Chesed La'alafim, yes.
All right. And here we have the third or the fourth reference in the entire Tanakh to Chesed Ve'emet.
That's great. Great stuff. Good pull.
All right, go ahead. What do you got to say about the concluding three verses?
Okay, the trope there, Vayevakshu Harofim, the Dargat Severe. There's all the intensity there, the wondering on the crowd, are they going to escape or not? Imagine hearing the story for the first time. And then verse 23, Vayashuvu, and they returned. They happily come back. Yeah, with the Azla Geresh, they happily returned to Joshua. If they didn't, they couldn't go ahead with the plan. And then again, the echoes of what Rachav said before, Ki natan Adonai, God gave us into their hands, and V'gam namogu, the inhabitants are quaking.
There we go, that namogu again.
Which was also in the shir. So 3 times that word.
All right.
Really unusual. I don't remember seeing it anywhere else. We could word search that too. Any other namogus in the Torah. But anyway.
Well, take us home with the last 3 verses.
Vayelchu, vayavo'u hahara, vayeshvu sham, shloshet yamim, ad shavu harodfim, vayevakshu harodfim, bechol haderech velo matza'u, vayashuvu shnei hanashim, Vayirdu mehahar, vayavru, vayavo'u. El Yehosh, this vayavo'u, that echoes again how the spies came straight to Rachav. Here they coming straight. They pass through the camp. They come straight to Joshua. Vayavo'u el Yehoshua bin Nun, vayisapru lo ekol hamotz otam. Vayomru el Yehoshua, ki natan Adonai beyadenu et kol haaretz v'gam namogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipaneinu.
So, Rick, we have a completely different report of the spies here than we had in our parsha.
All positive.
All positive, all convinced. Nice story.
And there's a woman as a hero.
And the woman is a hero. And by the way, according to some traditions, she actually has a role to play later on. I have read that according to some traditions, though not necessarily ours, she is the grandmother or great grandmother of Boaz, who marries Ruth, who becomes a progenitor of the Davidic line, though I don't think that is the common view in our tradition. In any case, as always, thanks to our technical advisor, our transliteration tyrant, and our top toad, Norm Gar, for all that he does. Don't forget to write to us with your thoughts and comments. Our emails are below, and we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a happy June.
Bye-bye. Bye.